Hello and welcome to the Political Fight Back Begins. Today's day is Thursday, the 26th of March, 2026, the year of serious politics. And the way we win is we get Great Britain on the blockchain because all legal and political influence stem from economic power. Right, let's cue the intro.
We have before us the opportunity to forge a new world order.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the new world order.
Not only fight for Ukraine, we fight for this new world order.
And the leader of the opposition and the deep state.
This is exactly what this government wants. It's communism 101.
For the new world order.
Here we go, and today I'm delighted to say I have David C. Carter with me, who is the founder of the Truth Contract, who was interested in coming on the show and explaining his ideologies, certainly after he saw Andrew Bridgen on my show the other day. So welcome, David. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Right, yeah. How would you like to start? Do you want to introduce yourself and tell people about your idea?
Sure. I'm 67 years old. In September this year, I would have been at work 49 years. I didn't go to university. I have two children who are now in their late 30s, who I brought up on my own from when they were 7 and 3. And I've been blessed recently with two lovely grandchildren, one from each of my children. And I spent 30 years of my career, the last 30 years, mentoring CEOs. And I eventually built up what became the world's leading chief executive mentoring company. And essentially, we had offices and clients all around the world. And what we helped our clients do was solve problems. And starting back almost exactly 6 years when COVID came out, my mind was open to lots of things that didn't add up. And for the last 6 years, I have been exploring who controls the world and how things like COVID could have happened. And that's led me off down lots of other rabbit holes. And about 2 years ago, I decided as my legacy project, I should pull everything together that I've done in my career and try and put together a team of people who could mentor the turnaround and saving of Britain.
That's excellent. So would you like to carry on and tell people your conclusions to all of that research?
Well, the problems that we are staring down the barrel of a gun, trying to figure out solutions to, are extremely complex. And of course, they are global. And so this is by far the biggest, most complicated turnaround project that I've ever been involved with. But it does pull together lots of great experience that I've had. So the simple statement, if you like, is that Britain is not yet broken, but is breaking at a rapid speed, as, by the way, are lots of other countries all around the world. And so in the last 6 years, the growth of the alternative media and indeed mainstream media has focused on the problems. And what I've focused on is the solutions to the problems. I wanted to understand what the problems are and work together with experts, subject matter experts in those various fields to create solutions. And over the last 9 months, I've also had those subject matter experts do podcasts with me where they've explained, here's the problem in this area, here's the solution that we would recommend, here's the policies that would be required, here's the change in legislation or constitution that would be required, and that they themselves would welcome an opportunity to get involved in helping turn around that particular problem. And we've looked at the entirety of the economy and all of the supranational influences on the UK, from the UN to the World Health Organization to NATO, the European Court of Human Rights, and all the others as well. And, so we've looked at everything from farming to finance, from fisheries to fluoride, to all of the problems or all of the areas that have got problems that need solutions. And we're working over the next year or so to create an integrated plan that solves all of those problems on a joined up basis.
That's a big project. Where did you start, and how do you see when the hardest thing is when you're dealing with lots of individuals and groups and all that, is actually coming to consensus? Is that something that you were able to do?
So one of the problems, there's hundreds of them, is that particularly the media, and alternative media too, is very reductionist in its thinking and behavior. If we only sorted out immigration, we'd be fine. If we sorted out farming, we'd be fine, or the food supply, or energy, or net zero. So there's lots of experts in silos who've got very good work, but they think if they could solve that problem, everything else would be solved. And so, and it's not that simple. And I think that one of the conclusions that I've come to over the last 6 years is that what happens, and I'm going to talk a lot today about Britain, but we can apply the same to every European country and every other country around the world, is that we live in an illusion of democracy.
Yeah.
And, obviously at the moment in the UK, we've got the launch of new parties like Reform and Restore and Advance and the Greens. And to me, people just don't understand that politics is theatre, and politics absolutely does not run this country. The country is run by the civil service and all the quangos that have been established over the last 20, 30 years, who themselves are collaborating with or manipulated by or influenced by supranational bodies like the World Health Organization or the United Nations or the Bilderberger Group, the Trilateral Commission, and all of those other nefarious actors who are unelected, unaccountable, and unknown, who have gigantic influence over everything that goes on in the UK. And so we live in an illusion of democracy. And so, which has been by design. And so part of the solution is, how do we unplug the UK from all of those supranational bodies, or even if we unplug ourselves from all the supranational bodies, how do we reform the civil service and all of the quangos such that they really are the servants of the people, rather than the people have ended up being the servants of them? And so the system needs a factory reset, the entire system. And at the next general election in 3.5 years' time, it doesn't really matter who's voted in, they will make no difference whatsoever if we don't rewire, reboot, factory reset the system, the operating system of how the country works. And so, and in all honesty, at the moment, I'm not exactly sure how to do that. I've got some ideas, and other people in our Wisdom Council network have got some great ideas. But what we're focusing on for the next year and a half is not how to get it implemented, but what it is should be implemented, if that makes sense.
So would you say that one of the core things of getting things implemented is transparency?
100%.
Yeah.
I think that, there are so many posts all the time, and there are like the procurement files where it gets revealed that the government signed this contract with this company worth hundreds of millions of pounds or billions of pounds that was never discussed in Parliament, never voted on, never mentioned in a manifesto. And ordinary people are like, what? You're spending our taxpayer money on things like that? And also, I think, as Andrew Bridgen mentioned, and lots of other commentators have also mentioned, the system is completely corrupt.
And how do you think it's been corrupted? What's the source of it?
Well, sadly, I think the answer is human nature. I don't think corruption has only happened in the last 30 years. It's happened throughout history. And people who want to have more power often become more corrupt in order to get more power and exercise that power. So I don't think we should be surprised that there is corruption, but in order to restore something that does work for the people, every government every transaction everywhere should be able to be scrutinized, and that certainly isn't the case today. And I think if everything was transparent, first of all, lots of things that money's wasted on or spent on today wouldn't happen, because people go, oh no, if people knew that was happening, we'd get thrown in jail or fired or whatever. But I think that so much goes on that has nothing to do with a political party's manifesto, or is ever discussed in Parliament, which is captured on television and Hansard. And when people find out about these things, they're shocked. It's like, why are they spending our tax money on that? Or, who approved that? And did they have any conflicts of interest? And so transparency, freedom of information tied with free speech means that everything can be scrutinized by everybody and commented on.
Yeah, and what if there was just someone or a central entity who could just print currency from nothing and therefore pay people to do whatever they want because they weren't reliant on tax revenue? Would that cause corruption?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If someone or something could just simply print currency from nothing and therefore they weren't reliant on tax revenue, would that cause corruption, do you think?
Maybe I don't understand the question properly, but is that not the system we've had since the late 1600s, that the fiat global banking cabal have created money out of nothing to finance wars and governments and what have you all around the world? And we've ended up with this ridiculous financial system that is going to blow up at some point in time. Mathematically, it has to. And I think that scheme has been used to influence those in power.
So coerce then?
And yes.
Coerce, manipulate, and start wars, obviously. Well,
yes.
Have you ever heard the expression, ultimate power corrupts absolutely?
Yes.
So if somebody had an unlimited amount of economic power so they could print currency from nothing, would that not aid corruption?
But isn't that what we've had for the last 350 years?
Oh, yeah. But what I'm saying is that sort of pinpoints the root of this, doesn't it?
I think that a tiny group of people over multiple centuries who did create this powerful money out of nothing, have ended up controlling the destiny of humanity and the world to suit their aims and their goals, which is why, as I said at the beginning, democracy is an illusion, because it's them that runs the show, not us electing people who we think are looking after us.
Yeah, so whoever controls the money controls the world.
Whoever controls the money can manipulate everything.
Yeah. So that's probably the source of everything, because they could, if somebody was being corrupt, they would have the economic power to stamp out the corruption or any behavior that they didn't want.
I'm not going to agree with you 100%. And the reason I say that is, do you remember the film Sophie's Choice?
Yes.
You know, at the end of the day, we all sometimes are put in a situation where we have to make really, really tough decisions. You know, I was a single parent for many years and had to make lots and lots of tough decisions. And I know at the end of the day that none of those decisions were to do with finance or economics. They were to do with spirituality and a moral compass. And no amount of money ever could have persuaded me to do anything to harm either of my children or allow anyone else to harm their children. And so I do understand, you know, money makes the world go round, but at the end of the day, humans also have a level of spirituality and a moral ethical compass that no amount of money could ever persuade me to do something that I knew I couldn't live with or wouldn't ever want anybody to know about or couldn't be transparent about. And it's not that I don't want to improve my financial state or to assist my children or your children or everybody's children to have a better world in the future. But I think there is more than just the money. The people who have controlled the money, I wonder sometimes if they have any moral compass whatsoever, and it would appear that they don't. But I think human beings, by and large, do have that moral compass, and there are things that they would always refuse to do, regardless of the amount of money that they were bribed or coerced into.
Well, are you familiar with the Chinese Great Leap Forward in the 1950s under Chairman Mao?
Not as much as you are.
Okay, well, it's just they were a bit because it was so bad, a manufactured famine, where they think between 15 and 55 million Chinese people perished. There were reports of cannibalism, people eating and selling their children. So, you know, I would say if you're pushed to the limits, there are things that people just have to do to survive. And then also during World War II, with the experiments that took place in Germany and in Japan's Unit 703, where literally the experiments that they did on live human beings were just absolutely horrendous, that they ended up bringing about the Nuremberg Code.
No, I am familiar with, you know, lots of the MK Ultra and things like that. I'm just saying, and I don't know, I mean, we could talk for hours about this, but my belief is that human beings have a moral, ethical compass that some will sell very cheaply. I mean, I think that lots and lots of MPs and senior officials in governments all around the world, they've got a very low bar for being bribed or corrupted or, you know, being paid off or silenced or voting in a certain way. That's the corruption we've been talking about. And so I know it exists and I know it's prolific and it goes on all around the world. But I also have faith in humanity, that humanity, by and large, is even in that horrible situation you just described in China, which I can't even get my head around. It wouldn't have been every parent that decided to devour their children to survive. It would have been some, but not all. I don't think all of humanity is driven exclusively by money.
Yeah, I would just say that it's an extremely heavy influence, or influence mechanism.
No, I do agree with that. I do agree with that.
But also in terms of using it for influence. So, for example, if you had an agenda and you wanted, for example, to depopulate the planet, and you had to inject people with poison, and you ran a mass media campaign telling people that this thing was safe and effective and good for you, economic power can also lead on, help you manipulate behaviors, and you can take advantage of people's good nature by telling them that they might want to take it to save granny.
No, that you've just described is essentially a lot of what we've been studying for the last 6 years. Whether it's the biopharmaceutical industrial complex, or the censorship industrial complex, or the energy industrial complex, the warfare industrial complex, they are all owned and controlled by a very small number of actors for whom the accumulation of limitless power and financial control over everybody is the most important thing. And I don't, I'm sad about it, but let's take the COVID thing as an example. Throughout the last 50, 60 years, probably longer, the education system in this country told us, not explicitly, about the social contract. Work hard, be honest, be decent, respect your, the vicar, the policeman, the courts, the government. We'll take care of everything from the potholes to the defense and the NHS, so you don't need to worry about it. You just get on with your lives. And so I think people have been brainwashed into not being curious, not having critical thinking skills, not being skeptical. However, I think in the last 5 or 6 years, millions and millions of people have woken up and said, hang on a minute, this social contract doesn't work. And so now, I've yet to meet one person who didn't get the COVID jab who regrets that decision. But I've met hundreds and hundreds of people who did have 1 or 2 or more COVID jabs who now regret that decision.
Yeah. And
so I think, and as I said in the introduction, it was that COVID thing that really sort of got me intrigued by what's really going on. And I remember very early on in COVID, I was actually at a friend's house, and I remember there was someone showed me something in 138 countries around the world, in just about every language around the world, on one day, the vaccines are safe and effective was the mantra of all these newscasters around the world. And it's like, hang on a minute.
They're not being tested.
No. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. It's like, how come 138 countries on the same day come out with the same script all around the world? Who's orchestrated that?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was one of my big suspicions, is like, hang on a minute, there's a supranational dark force going on here that's controlling the product and the media and the medical and everything to get that safe and effective mantra out into the public. And that was one of the things, like, hang on, who's doing this and who's behind it all and how's it all being orchestrated and how come it all happened on the same day in 138 countries and 98 languages at the same time. It was clearly very well orchestrated. So that was where my journey started. And so, and I could be wrong on this, but I think that there is such a tiny small group of people who have the power, have the access to the money, or manage the money, who've created this matrix, this control grid, this prison for everybody. And the average person who's getting on with their studies or their apprenticeship or trying to raise a family, get to work on time, get the kids to school on time, pack their lunches and make sure they got their soccer kit with them. And, you know, they're worried about heating bills and holidays and all the normal things that parents and families have to worry about. They don't have the intelligence or access to the information that could help them end up saying, hang on a minute, this doesn't add up to me. And actually what I think is interesting over the last 6 years is, even though the mainstream media haven't covered any of the subjects that we're investigating, ordinary people are like, what are all these lines in the sky? We didn't used to have those. The other, you've been to my house, you know where it is, but I moved here 2 years ago, and I have had to go twice in those 2 years to the doctor's surgery, which is a mile away, and it's a rural country setting. And when I went, and the first time I didn't need to see a doctor, I just went to register, move there. And the receptionist, very nice lady, said to me, oh, by the way, you know, if you need to see a doctor, phone this number between this time and this time. And at the moment, we've got about a 3 or 4 day wait, you know, for non-urgent appointments. So I said, fine, thank you. And then a year later, I had a notification from the NHS because of my age. I needed some bowel cancer test or something. And so I went down to make an appointment for the blood test to be done. And it was a 4 weeks and 2 days wait. And I said, wow, you know, it's gone from 3 or 4 days to 4 weeks plus 2 days. Have you got 4 times as many patients, or are the same patients 4 times as ill as they were, you know, a year ago? And she said, well, we haven't got many more patients. So I said, so it seems like everyone's going to the doctors a lot more than they were 2 years ago. And, you know, one of the things that, this will take, let's press pause on that a second. One of the things that worries me, and I'll come back to that point in a second, is all the things that no one is talking about that are real existential threats to life on Earth and humanity and quality of life in Britain. One of them is demographics that we might talk about, but the other is what we did a project about at the end of last year called Spermageddon, which is all of the things that are causing the massive reduction in sperm quality and quantity in men and egg viability in women. And it's all man-made toxic soup stuff. When we did all of that research, all of the things that are causing this massive deterioration in health are all man-made toxic ingredients. And of course, the COVID jab was one of those, the mRNA jab. And so we've actually created a system that is joined up and organized, funded by Big Pharma and all the people who own them, the financial industrial complex, that is actually making people sick and needs them to be lifetime customers. And so in order to have a healthy economy, we need a healthy population. But actually, at the end of the day, you know, birth rates have dropped off a cliff, and since 2021, we have had continued growing excess mortality every year, which just has never happened in history. We're not in the last 100+ years. And so older people are now dying younger than they've done for the last 100 years. And the number of years of their life that they have in strong health is getting less and less. And we're not having any babies. And part of that, I think, for the 50 years after the Second World War was lifestyle choice. But since the 80s and 90s, we've literally allowed companies to create a toxic soup with endocrine, hormone disrupting chemicals, immune system destruction chemicals, cancer causing chemicals, infertility causing. It's like, what the hell are we allowing these idiots in charge to do to us? Now, of course, they are being influenced, blackmailed, colluded with the people who own the drug companies or the whatever other companies, 5G masks, 6G masks. And so ordinary people are waking up. I don't know if they're waking up in enough numbers. I suspect not. But what we're planning to do over the next year and a half is say, look, here's a problem, but here's the solution. And we're going to create an app early next year for people to say, whether it's fluoride in the water or Bovaer in the cattle food, or the mRNA jabs, or lots and lots of things, not just healthcare things, lots of other things too. And say, here's what's going on today. Here's a better solution. Here's how it will be done, how much it would cost, the benefits, whatever. Do you want to keep it as it is or vote for this new thing? And so actually, I have hope and faith that by educating people and allowing them to feel a bit more empowered, that they can vote in favor of something that they've been educated on when they weren't educated about it at school, or they're not educated in the media, and their friends start talking about it and they feel they're doing something about it by voting on it, then I am really confident that over the next 2 years, we can put together a manifesto that everybody who gets involved in the project will see that we're being even-handed. Here's what this person says. Here's what the government's response is. Here's what that expert says. Here's what but you decide. You've got informed choice now on what you think the solution would be. I was chatting this morning with someone, and I want to run this past you to see what you think of the idea. So the Royal Albert Hall contains about 8,000 seats. And we've got 650 constituencies in this country. So let's say that we had an event once a month at the Royal Albert Hall, and 10 people from each of the 650 constituencies was picked at random, like they do with jury trials. So you couldn't buy a ticket, or it was a completely random invitation and your ticket wasn't transferable, like it's not with jury service. And 6,500 people turned up every month, and over the course of 2 or 3 hours, and this would be televised, there was an opportunity to say, well, here's how much the government spends on this, and here's what the government's policy about digital IDs is, or central bank digital currencies, or mRNA rollout, or fluoride in the water, or whatever. And here's the pros and here's the cons. So you vote, live on TV, whether it should be kept, ditched, or you're not sure. And I would think that people would actually find that kind of idea really beguiling. It's almost like a game show where people can vote, in the Royal Albert Hall, but they could also vote like they do in Britain's Got Talent online or on their phones. And so I want to find and create a way where British people feel that they're involved in the decisions about their country. And one of those subjects, of course, which I know is dear to your heart, will be how does the financial system that we've got today, which is this 100-year-old Ponzi scheme that is mathematically has to blow up eventually, what should it be replaced with? And going back to something else we discussed earlier, how can we make sure that all the information about everything is transparent so that smart, clever people can go in and summarize it and present it to the public? I'd like us to move towards some kind of direct democracy model, because to me, politics is broken and will never, ever, as it's currently set up, ever be able to solve the problems that we're facing. And I think we're running out of time. And so me and my colleagues, our Wisdom Council, are working on all the solutions in a joined up plan that we can present to the public with a documentary and a manifesto and all those other good things in a year and a half, 2 years' time. And so I want to put the power back in the hands of the people to vote on what it is they want the future of this country to look like and the future they want to leave for their children and grandchildren. We've created a Vision 2061 document, which we can put a link in the show notes afterwards, people who can find on the Truth Contract Substack. And we want people to get involved and say, well, this is missing from your vision document, or I like this idea, but you could add this, or maybe this would be a better way of doing it. So we want people to feel that they can be involved in shaping the conversation. We are not a political party. We'll never be a political party. We want to be the turnaround team, the team that gets hired, having aired our suggestions and policies in public to the British people, who then voted in favour of it, to then go in and make the turnaround changes that are going to be required. And that's going to require a lot of constitutional reform, legal reform, and of course it's going to require a new financial system that is transparent and understood how it works by everybody, and it's fair. And I think that there are ways, and I'm not going to go into huge detail today, but we've looked at ways in which the money that's currently collected in tax, that's then spent on civic projects, could be collected in a completely different way that was fair, transparent, and yes, fair and transparent. But we also need to look at things like, how do we incentivize young people under 30 to start families and having babies, which is going to require a new housing strategy and a tax strategy. And we've got to figure out a way to get whatever it is, 5 million people who are on benefits, 1 million of whom are under 25, back into the workplace and contributing and having a purpose in their life. And so there's lots of complicated, interconnected things that we need to work on. So we're not ready to reveal this until we've really thought it through, come up with a joined up plan. But part of that plan will need a transparent, fair financial system, which has to replace the current broken fiat Ponzi scheme that I've always wondered, you'll know the answer to this, but when the people who created this fractional reserve fiat Ponzi finance scheme, surely they must have understood that mathematically at some point in time it would blow up like all Ponzi schemes do. They must have known that whether it took 50 years, 100 years, 250 years, at some point it would blow up and wouldn't be able to carry on working.
Yeah. But what happens is, during that time where it's counting down and about to blow up, what they do is they try and accumulate as many resources as possible in that time. And then when it collapses, The reason it collapses is that people are in debt to the institution that caused the collapse in the first place. So they actually clean up in every collapse. So they actually have an incentive to collapse the economy, because then they take over all the small businesses that have actually collapsed and put them on their balance sheet and just increase their own monopolistic power. So it's a purposely orchestrated boom and bust economy that benefits those who can print currency from nothing, because if you can print currency from nothing, you're not the one that goes bust. It's everyone else.
Right, but I've not studied this anything like as much as you have, but everything you've just said I agree with and can understand. But at some point, surely you get to a point where there isn't anybody who says it's worth starting a business or it's worth going to work, or because, you know, the system's so completely rigged against everybody and everything. And so it must come to a point where, okay, they've ended up owning all the assets, but no one wants to play in their game anymore.
But this is where they can make people desperate enough and say, look, we'll make your life easier. If you want some food, all you've got to do is inject you with this safe and effective vaccine.
Okay, but actually, you and I both know that it's not safe and it's not effective, and actually, it's going to bring about a depopulation over, you know, the next half century. And so, given the birth rate collapse, given the mortality increase, you know, they might end up in 100 years' time owning everything, but there aren't any humans left.
Yeah, but there'll be people in their network left. So in other words, they will have got rid of all the genetically, what they call genetically repugnant people are don't deserve to be here, and they're just with their own kind, with a world of their own. That's what they want. They want a world of their own. So we're either going to be dead or enslaved.
Yes, it's the Hunger Games, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's why they made the movie, to tell us what's coming. Predictive programming.
Right, but so I accept that if we don't do anything at all, that's where we're going to end up.
Absolutely.
And so what I've decided to do is dedicate the rest of my life to creating an alternative to that outcome through the Truth Contract and the Great Britain Renewal Project.
Fantastic. Do you want to talk more about that, to tell people how it's going to be orchestrated, how it's going to work?
Well, the next general election is 3.5 years away. And I'm working on the assumption that turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and that Keir Starmer and his merry band of Labour MPs will cling on to the very last day before a general election has to be called. And given the fact that they've already cancelled and delayed local elections and what have you, it wouldn't surprise me if in those 3.5 years there isn't some major catastrophe, emergency suspension of, you know, the general election, whatever. But anyway, it's 3.5 years at a minimum that we've got this lot in control. And I'm going to let the new political parties and the existing political parties carry on their theatre for the next 3.5 years, slag each other off, talk a load of rubbish and get nothing done. And what I'm doing is orchestrating in stealth mode over the next 1.5 years. At the moment, we've got just over 40 subject matter independent experts in every area that you can think of, who are writing policy papers on health, finance, farming, farmer, energy, education, everything, you know, the law. And so during that 1.5 years, we will create, if you like, the skeleton for the manifesto for change, which contains all the topics that we've thought of and our members and audience have thought of that need changing. One of the ways we're doing it is creating this vision for 2061, which is one generation in the future, and saying, if we got this right, what would we want the country to look like and how would we like it to operate in a generation's time? Because some of these things, like net zero, because of what's happened in the last 20, 30 years, we can't flick a switch and get, nuclear as a solution, or oil and gas in the North Sea, or whatever. Some of these things might take 10 years to turn around and sort out. So we're starting off with the vision, and that is all based on first principles. So if we take energy, the example I was just talking about, if you say, okay, well, in 2061, we want to have energy sovereignty, energy security, energy abundance, and energy affordability. And that's kind of the first principle. So how do we get from where we are to there? How long is it going to take? Who's going to do it? How much is it going to cost? What will the benefits be? All of that's what these experts are coming up with policies to solve. If someone came along and said, okay, well, I agree with all of your things, security, sovereignty, affordability, and abundance. However, it all needs to be renewable. And so then you can say to that person, well, fine, great. Please come back with a business plan that shows that even if it's all renewable, it's still affordable and abundant and secure. Because if it is, we'll put that to the people. But if it isn't, the people have voted for abundance, affordability, security, and sovereignty as the first principle. So it allows for debate and discussion. And we're going to do that for literally everything, or everything we can think of. And so the vision is that by the end of 2027, we will have created all of the components of the strategy. We will have had podcasts delivered by the subject matter experts in those various areas who will have come up with a policy that people can vote on in our referendum app. And one of our partners will be the CEBR, the Economic Business Think Tank, who will do all the modeling and check that all the numbers work and it all adds up. But we believe that over the first 5 years of this plan being put in place, that we could make an improvement in the UK economy by at least £250 billion. And so, a gigantic, it's a quarter of the tax take that we have today. But we need to be looking into areas that no one's talking about, from demographics to the toxic soup, to AI, to finance, and all the things that are severely going to impact on the economy and demographics and the population that no one's modeling. We need to do that as well. So we really do have a joined up plan. But, our podcasts will be educational, so the public can learn about things that they weren't aware of before, from people who are neutral, not trying to sell them anything, with no conflicts of interest. They'll be completely transparently independent. So people can have informed consent and vote on these things in the app. And we will have a joined up, we call it our Wisdom Council, which will probably end up with just short of 100 people on it, which is all the subject matter experts, who together, I think the British public, that's what they would like to think the current House of Lords is supposed to be doing for us. Like an independent, transparent group of people who don't have political affiliations, who would be the guardians and the custodians of that Vision 2061, and would check that, on the government that they and the civil service, that they were doing the things that the people had voted for and wanted to happen, that had been aired in the podcast, voted on in the app, and to oversee that the outcomes and the execution of the strategy was going to deliver on the Vision 2061.
And in order to orchestrate all of these things, and also and to make sure that things were being done corrected and people weren't, skimming off the top, making sure corruption wasn't happening in any of the systems, would it help if it was all recorded on an immutable ledger?
Absolutely. I don't see how we could achieve the Vision 2061 without it being so transparent in the way you've described.
And in order to have an immutable ledger, that ledger can't have any central point of or authority, can't have any central point of authority, control, or failure. So it can't be manipulated. That
sounds right to me.
Yeah. So the only way you can ever have something like that is if it operates via economic incentive, which means it would have to have an asset that economically incentivized multiple operations to sustain. And that's what Bitcoin is. That's where Bitcoin gets its value. So if you've got a digital token that sustains a digital ledger that doesn't have any central point of authority or control, then that asset, because it has a utility, can then also generate a market value, which means not only can it be used to economically sustain a ledger, it can actually be used as a medium of exchange and a new form of money, which would actually be the most valuable commodity and money on earth, because everybody would be using this digital ledger instead of running their own very, very costly server networks or web providers like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Cloud.
We'll have to have another conversation at some point, because I want to learn all about this. As I said in our conversation, we're going to need a new financial system, and you're proposing one that sounds like it could be extremely viable and useful, but I don't know or understand enough about it at the moment. So I'd like to have a follow-up conversation with you about this. But going back to my Royal Albert Hall idea, I'm trying to pick something up. So let's say, let's take an example, Bovaer. Do you know what Bovaer is?
I do indeed.
Yes, it's this cattle food additive that was put in place to stop cows burping and causing methane to do with climate change. And it is a complete and absolute disaster. It was never in a manifesto. It's never been discussed in Parliament. And it should be stopped immediately. So let's say at this Royal Albert Hall, in the pros and cons of whether Bovaer should be stopped, replaced, or continued, I think that's an opportunity for people to understand the corruption that went into the decision to implement it in the first place, and to hopefully agree that it should be stopped and not replaced with anything. And so, that whole voting thing is transparent. So then someone is given the task of implementing it, and they're being supervised, and everything they do, the decisions they make, would be transparent and on a ledger. I can see how that transparency would avoid corruption, skimming off the top, and the other things you said, but not for today's conversation. But what I'd like to understand is how the Bitcoin solution that you're proposing would not only enable the transparency, but would also be good for the participants.
Well, it's good for the participants in that it's private, because the only thing you actually see on the ledger is a wallet address and a movement of data to another wallet address. So therefore, the only living individuals who actually know who's involved in that are those who are actually doing it. So it's private. You can't actually see anybody's identity on the ledger itself. But that ledger isn't that ledger can record absolutely everything. So it just means that the truth, judges, the Constitution, politicians' behavior, it can all be recorded, and they can't deny it. Because the transaction is sent to someone and there's a chain of signatures, which means each and every individual holds other individuals accountable for how they use the network, and you can see movements on it. It means that even though it's private, and it also means with it being private, it means that Big Brother can't data scrape their own private corporate servers that have all your information on it and track and control you and coerce you in any way. We can actually get away from that so that they can't manipulate us and control us and coerce us in any way. And also with it being transparent, for example, we would be able to see the contents of the vials that, said Jibby Jabby came in. So if they said, oh, well, this is what we've created, it's okay, well, let's see it then. So then we can have it tested. The results can be put on the ledger, and those results stand forever because they can't be deleted. So if somebody else either disputes them, a bit like putting an affidavit in, you can put an affidavit in, and you can tell whether or not that's been rebutted or not.
Okay, but I think the really interesting thing about what you've just said to do with the jabs is the public, through the psychological warfare industrial complex, was told it's safe and effective, trust the science and all the rest of it. But actually, if the testing which was done was transparently put on a ledger, the ordinary people go, well, sorry, where is the testing? Where is the science? There isn't any.
Exactly.
You told me safe and effective and trust the science. There wasn't any. So that's why I like this idea a lot, because I think we have been lied to so much about so many things. And because we've been brainwashed into trusting the people in power for so long in the social contract, that now more and more people are waking up and thinking, this doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. This is making my life worse, not better. Or they're watching local businesses close down left, right, and centre, and they happen to know the people who ran the business because their kids were in scouts together or something, and they explain that it's so expensive to hire staff, get rid of staff, or whatever now. And so I think that the transparency that would have, if we had this system that you're proposing 6 years ago, literally people would be interrogating the data that was on the ledger and saying, excuse me, where is the testing? Where is the science that settled? It didn't exist.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So it would also prevent so many bad things happening.
Yeah. And also, so let's say, for example, if somebody came on, because let's say this ledger was scaled so that it could actually host news broadcasts, movies, radio chats, voice messages, social media, everything. If somebody did come out and say, well, this is safe and effective, because everything is uploaded onto an immutable timestamp server, you can ask, because you can find out on the ledger somewhere, where did you come up with that statement that it was safe and effective from? Who was it that first said this? And where did they get their data or information from that made them come to this conclusion? You could trace it back through time because you can find everything because it's on the same ledger.
No, I do like this a lot, because not only do I believe that we need free speech, we need true speech. And what this would do is enable the truth to always surface to the top.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the whole point. So this is what I'm saying. In order to make all of this come to fruition, we need a transparent ledger of truth. And the only way you can have a transparent ledger of truth without any central point of authority or control is if that ledger is economically sustained through economic competition. And in order to create economic competition, you have to have an asset. And if that asset has the value because people need to use it in order to upload information onto the ledger, then it can also be used as a medium of exchange. So this is what I'm saying. This potentially could facilitate everything that we need. It's the foundation layer of everything that we need to solve all these problems.
No, I understand that. And that's why I'm excited about us exploring this further. I know that your passion and your interest is in this transparent ledger and digital solution, which is fantastic, because that needs to be part of, or a big part of, the solution. And in a way, you need me to be doing what I'm doing with all of the different areas of policy that we're reviewing to put onto your ledger to create the transparency and the truth seeking that we all demand and want and know is going to be required to turn this situation around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So another thing that people can do is if coppers or police turn up at your door, you can see whether or not they have a valid warrant, or if they even do have a warrant, because everything should be issued on the ledger. Like when was that issued and by who? Because everything has to have a digital signature on it. So you can trace the chain of authority, and if there's no judge that gave that order, then you know that warrant's fake. And so those people who are turning up with this fake warrant, well, they're the one that are on the hook for it.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't do it and they can't deny it because the truth is there and it can't be deleted.
One of the other reasons I like this is, and I won't go into any particular names, but I think there's sufficient evidence that a number of very prominent, well-known people, powerful, wealthy people who were in positions of power and influence several years before the COVID pandemic actually made investments into the drugs that were going to be rolled out later on, and they were involved in making the decision to use that particular drug. And so all of that, if it was on a ledger and transparent, people say, well, hang on a minute, how can you be recommending this if you were a shareholder in the company that's going to make the vaccines?
Exactly, yeah. It exposes conflict of interest, and those people wouldn't be able to deny it, and therefore they would be forced to recuse themselves if they were involved in any decision making.
No, I love that.
Yeah, and also, for example, judges' decisions. We can also find out if they are being unconstitutional, because as we know from Hailsbury's law, there is no authority for administrative courts in this country, and no act can be passed to legitimize them due to the constraints placed upon the monarch in their coronation oath at their coronation. So who is it that might be orchestrating and managing these administration courts, pretending or implying that they actually have any authority whatsoever? So they can be held accountable forever, because there is no time limit on treason.
Well, we've got lots and lots of things that need sorting out, and there's lots and lots of problems, all of which need solutions. And I think that what you're working on and is absolutely a very valid component of, if not, part of the platform, if you like, for all of the areas of change that we're exploring and will be working on coming up with a Great Britain Renewal Project manifesto for in the next couple of years. So I look forward to genuinely continuing the conversations with you I've enjoyed every conversation we've ever had. I've learned a lot. You are an absolute expert in this area, and I know I'm not, and I know I need to learn more about it. I'm working 24/7 on all of the other things that are worrying me, us, and the general public. Because one of the things that I didn't mention at the beginning is that, and it started off with this. I noticed, this is like a year into the mainstream media were all spouting the same narrative. It was like they'd all been given a hymn sheet. Whereas on the alternative media, the high wire and things like that, they would go, no, hang on, that's not true. Here's an expert who can debunk that and explain why it's not true. And then I realized that this was going on in energy and farming and food and water and air and every aspect of life. There is the mainstream media narrative and there's the alternative media narrative, and they're at opposite ends of the rainbow. And so getting to what the truth is, and coming up with an alternative to the status quo, and using a platform like you're describing could say, well, here's all the information. Here's what they say. Here's what they say. Here's what they say. Here's the testing they've done. Here's the scientific evidence that they've got. And, make your own mind up. Now you've got all that information.
Absolutely. Because with all that information, people can then make informed consent.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think there would be many other people in your network that could do with hearing this information that I've just shared with you today?
Well, I think what we need to do is, thank you for having me as a guest on your show. In the next month or so, I'd like to have you as a guest on my show, and we can talk about the solution to all of what we're working on that what your work can deliver. So I'd absolutely be delighted to do that and then share it far and wide afterwards.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a great conversation, David. I've really and thoroughly enjoyed it. We've been going for 1 hour, 7 minutes, so it's probably a good time to wrap it up if you'd like to conclude in any way with a final statement.
I think that a statement. I am positive and optimistic that this breaking down, which is happening at an accelerating rate, is reversible, stoppable and reversible, and we can put the train back on the tracks to end up at a very nice destination. First of all, I think we need to be realistic and understand that, I talk about Vision 2061. I'll be dead by then, but I want to know that I've died with the train on the tracks heading in that direction for my children and my grandchildren and for society. But I also want people to realize we need to get on with this. This is not something we can wait another 5 years or 10 years to start thinking about, because we're heading for a train crash. We can avoid that train crash, I think, but only if we get a move on with starting to work on solving the problem. And that needs a whole army of people saying, I don't want to be involved in this failure, which I can see happening. I want to be involved in the turnaround and the success.
Oh, interesting. You used the description of army there. That's exactly what I think we need as well. But armies need financing, and those who control the current financial system will simply not allow that, which is why we have to have an alternative monetary system that they don't control, so that we can finance an army to actually uphold the Constitution and our values and bring justice to those who require it and restore everything that made our country great, which are the social norms and values that we have as a culture, where we detest child abuse because we know it damages children in their later life and their emotional developments and things like that. So it's upholding those cultures and principles that actually requires an economic solution, in my mind. But as you said, we'll probably talk about that next time.
Thank you very much for this conversation. I've always enjoyed every conversation with you, and I look forward to the next one.
It's been a pleasure. I will play the outro and then we'll speak again afterwards. Here we go.
My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institutions. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write. If we maintain these basic principles, our democracy is safe. No dictatorship can exist with suffrage, freedom of speech and press.